Friday, SMITE fans. We're with you bright and early this weekend, because we got the Phase 3 SCC playoffs. My name is Dolson. Alpha Jackal is with me for the first set of the day, and then you and I are casting the next set as well, so we're going to be hanging out for a little while, AJ, and we're over in Europe to start off. The first half of the day is in EU, and Phase 3 of EU kind of went as expected with Belt Slap on top.
Yeah, I think Belt Slap and the Pappy still reigning as your number 1 and 2 respectively. Snake Pit sneaking that third seed just away from, from the rest of the pack. Pikarinoobs 2 are going to be your SOC representatives, finding up themselves against the monstrosity of Belt Slap to begin with. So far, it's only been the Pappies that have been able to take a set off them, and they almost managed to do so in the final week. So it could be a dicey game for them today.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult, and the way this bracket works is you got round 1, then into the semifinals. Both of those will be best of 3 matchups, and then on to the finals for a best of 5, and the advantage you get for remaining on the upper half of the bracket is 1 game in hand moving on to the final. So best of 3, best of 5 as we move on throughout the weekend. But you know, the way you look at it, this first matchup here, Belt Slap versus Pikarinoobs, we have seen these SOC teams come into some of these tournaments once or twice and, you know, put forward a good effort, but going up against Belt Slap, I think, is just a whole different animal. I mean, you look at the roster these guys have, it's been spoken time and time again. Arkle, Trix, Tank, Zeros, Johnny, Julio, one of the rosters that's largely unchanged, phase in and phase out here in the SCC, so very hard-pressed. I mean, have you seen anything, Alpha Jackal, in the past that leans into maybe a weakness for this Belt Slap team? How do you beat these guys?
You just have to do exactly what the Pappies have been able to do, which is win the one important team fight at the very end of the game and just take the game out from underneath them. You sort of have to hope that they do end up being human at times and making a mistake, and that comes far and few between.
Yeah, I mean, with the tenure that is on that roster, it is always going to be very difficult to kind of find those cracks in the armor. Anyone you maybe specifically like to zoom in on with this Belt Slap team? I really like to look at Zeros. Obviously pretty flexible out of that mid lane. Brings a lot of weight with him as far as needing to pick your matchups properly. Do you have anyone specifically you like to highlight on the Belt Slap team?
Obviously, you have the star player, which is Johnny, sort of a rising star in the European sort of side of things. But the silent assassin in Julio in the solo lane doesn't really get spoken about as highly as the rest of the team, but is probably one of the most, if not the most important member of the team, in my opinion. Just constantly puts in a shift week in, week out. And sometimes, more often than not, becomes the win condition for his team if they do have a bit of a stumble out of the blocks early game.
That's a great point, Alpha Jackal. I mean, you have a team with Arkle, Trix, Tank, and Zeros, and then your Johnny and Julio moving in this SEC, playing with these guys, and now being able to kind of make this team around you. I mean, a lot of it pivots around that solo lane. I absolutely agree. So that's definitely a boon to Julio and needing to put a little extra emphasis on him as well. I think Johnny out of that jungle, we know what he likes to play. The kind of hyper carry potential junglers are definitely something I think Pikarinoobs 2 have to look out for here today. What have you made of the long lane, though, so far here for this Belt Slap team? Arkle and Trix Tank, they feeling pretty synergistic to you over the recent weeks?
I felt like they have been, if anything, the place that you can target on Belt Slap.
Right.
For what we have seen of them, it's usually been a couple of target bans onto Arkle, maybe taking away the Sobek from Trix Tank, and just picking a very aggressive dual lane and just constantly invading onto the left-hand side, trying to limit the early game effectiveness of just the entire left-hand side of the map, and that seems to have been doing wonders for certain teams. And it's just having those slightly weird off-center picks has also been something that's worked out well. Worked out well for Smiley Face in the last SCC finals in Phase 2. They were the SOC team going into that tournament, so they took a game off of Belt Slap, and they looked like they could have even taken the set off them in the first round. So there are ways to do this, and for me, I'm going to look at the dual lane.
Yeah, right. It's definitely a good place to look. Well, you talk about the SOC team that was previously able to maybe take a game or so off of Belt Slap. The SOC team that's going to be playing against Belt Slap in round 1 this time around is going to be Pikarinoobs 2. This is a roster built around Davey, Alka, Pikarino, of course, Rapio, Captain Odie. you know, in some of the limited experience that we've gotten to watch this squad, they've obviously earned their way here. Definitely some name recognition on this roster as well. We focused, I think, on the long lane a decent bit here, Alpha Jackal, specifically for belt slap. Maybe that's a weakness. Do you think the Pikarinoobs 2 long lane has the talent, that potential to maybe make the belt slap long lane uncomfortable?
That's not all important too in their name. We have to mention it every time. But
yeah, right.
I think
not the first one.
No, it's the second iteration. Completely different. Totally different roster. I think they have what it takes to, upset the dual lane of Belt Slap, especially if Rapio does get off one of his famous early ganks. He's a very aggressive, early game focused jungler. Likes playing his Thanatos, likes playing his Darchies, likes playing his Hombats. Gods that can really get into your face early on, pre-level 5 and even post-level 5. So I'm looking at Rapio to make that early rotation, give Davey and Alka the support they need if they want to draft that early game aggressive dual lane, and just try and take the game from there.
Well, in order to do that, he'll need an aggressive early game jungler in his corner. Maybe picks and bans will allow him to do that. Again, I think junglers, to your point there, Alpha Jackal, are going to be important throughout this pick and ban phase, notably what you're going to take away from Johnny, because he does like that very specific type of jungler. We've seen him flex on and off of the different styles definitely in the past here. But the first ban is going to be the Hebo, now taken off the table for Belt Slap. We've seen a rise of Hebo, mainly in the mid lane in the SPL. Have seen some jungle Hebo. Do you think he's worthwhile banning out first?
I think Belt Slap have dealt well with Hebo in the past. The times where they've drafted against a Hebo, they've always gone into a Raven. Raven has an incredible matchup against a Hebo, could just stick onto him in the jungle very easily. It doesn't deal too well with roots, does Hebo, and, well, Raven just sticks you in one and then zooms after you with Mystic Rush, ignores all his damage from the Crushing Wave with that overhead kick. So to see it banned out this early means that it's one of two things. They're not comfortable against it in scrims, don't really want to pick the Raven this early, or they've done their research on Pikarinoobs too and have banned away a very comfort strong pick for them.
I noticed you weaved in the 2 there at the end, Alpha Jackal. Spot on. The Pikarinoobs 2. Maybe you have to, right? They might have the Hebo in the back pocket. Cthulhu and Olaran to follow up there. That is pretty standard as far as simply the tier list goes in our current meta. So strong bans from Belt Slap, taking away an important jungler in the Nemesis as well from Johnny. The carry potential that we've seen at some of the higher levels, even here in the SEC, down in the SOC as well. Nemesis continues to be a very strong pick. But the Sobek, I think, is somewhat interesting here, Alpha Jackal. Very strong as far as lockdown, difficult to deal with in the late game, but sort of teetering on the edge of that pick ban. But the Pikarinoobs 2, obviously feeling he's worthwhile in the ban. But that's going to open up Persephone for Belt Slap to lock in, and Zeros is going to have, I think, a pretty fun time here on this one in Game 1.
Persephone does have her issues. It is easy to pick her off in the early game. Like, she does get the pressure at wave 1 just because her plants allow her to do that. But up until about level 5, you can start to bully her around, start to pick her off a bit. So I don't mind the Sobek ban. I think it's a good ban for them. They've done their homework. They realize that Sobek has been a linchpin for Belt Slap drafts in the past. And they also managed to take away the Rama away from Arkil. His best god by far, in my opinion. Incredibly safe, incredibly strong in this meta, especially when you're building into attack speed. So far, I think the draft's gone extremely well for Pikarinoobs too.
Well, that's always the thing going into these. I mean, you hesitate to call this lopsided before we've even seen the teams, play on the battleground yet. But as far as expectations go, through the roof for Belt Slap and then realizing maybe it's an uphill battle for Pikarinoobs, you want to at least be able to get into the game without having lost in picks and bans. And Pikarinoobs, through the first 3 bans and the first 2 picks, have done that. Amaterasu left on the table, very, very strong out of that solo lane. Sometimes the immediate answer back to the Cthulhu, who was banned out by Belt Slap. But the Jingwei is now going to be where Arkil moves over to. Definitely a storied carry for himself there out of the duo lane. And then a tier for Julio. The tier for Julio is about as tried and true as it comes, I think. We've seen this guy control games on this pick time and time again.
Yeah, this is the I don't want to lose lane and I want to win the late game sort of pick for Julio.
Fair enough.
It's a very impossible to lock him down and beat him in the lane when he's on this god, and he'll pretty much always find a way to turn the tables, even in a bad matchup.
Yep.
The Bracken could flex into the
Interesting.
jungle. Rapio has played it in the jungle before, so I wouldn't be surprised if it does end up there, but it will stay as a flex pick, in my opinion. The next pick
Right.
should be a mage, just to keep that Bracken as a choice for the last pick.
Yeah, I wonder if Belt Slap then start to move their way into that mage pool ban, and they will, with the Merlin being taken away, and then Kali on the opposite side. So still sensing that Johnny needs one of those high carry potential junglers. Pikarinoobs 2 is going to be locking away that Kali, definitely one of Johnny's strong picks. The Emoja, though, I kind of forgot she's still around. I'm so used to her being banned out in the first 6 that's surprising to me that she's left open this long, but she'll fall down to the second wave of bans. Pikarinoobs 2 will take her away finally, and then maybe another mage ban, and it's going to be the Thoth taken off the table. So standard far and away, I think, from Belt Slap. Hera, I think, comes to mind here. Pikarinoobs 2 maybe moving into the Hera pick. She's been very popular out of the mid lane, and maybe it makes some sense.
It does make a lot of sense, gives quite a bit of safety against Persephone. It is going to be the lock-in of choice here. And if you're going to have to go up against Johnny if he's playing as Bakasura, Hera probably one of the best mages to do so against. And the other option would maybe have been Ra, recently received his buffs. Does have that slow immunity on his flashbang these days, so a bit more safety to him. But again, the Hera does make most sense. And it's Fafnir over to Trix Tank. You go from one extremely strong pick on his Sobek, you ban away his Emoja, and he still winds up with his Fafnir, almost like Julio winds up with his Tia.
Yeah, I'll take a Coerce on a late game Jingwei, please, and I'll have that one to go likely as the game rolls through. Ao Kwang, so I think for a lot of people that maybe haven't watched Belt Slap in the past, specifically Johnny in the past, the Ao Kwang is, I think, interesting as far as the Smite meta as a whole goes. We've seen him sprinkled in here and there, but Alpha Jackal to Johnny, maybe it's no surprise at all.
No, this is one of the 2 picks that he would have taken at this point. It's either Bakasura or Ao Kwang, and he's taking the Ao Kwang. Gives him a bit more magical-based damage, and it synergizes extremely well with the Fafnir. Doesn't have as much pressure in the early game as I would have liked to have seen, and maybe that's where Pikarinoobs have picked this Pele for, just to try and abuse that a bit more. That dot damage is going to have to come in handy to stop him escaping.
We have high expectations for Belt Slap, as you should, going into this one. Do you think Pikarinoobs 2 have done what I said they need to, given themselves a chance heading out of picks and bans onto the battleground?
I think if you take away the names at the top, just cover them up a bit,
right.
The draft is incredibly fine. In fact, I favor Pikarinoobs to draft more than I do Belt Slaps. It's just a case of can they execute it, and it's difficult to execute it to Belt Slap, as we've just been saying time and time again.
Right. Well, it's always good. You cover up the names and you say, all right, both drafts are good, but then unfortunately at some point we got to take those hands down, and it's Belt Slap on the other side, and they've got a lot of comfort drafted on their side. Arkle on this Jingwei is going to have a good time in the late game, but then there's Ram on the other side. So this one is interesting. We've seen these SOC teams have a good time against Belt Slap in the past. Game number 1 of this SCC weekend, Blazy and Goremizer will take us in.
Thank you, Dolson. Let's go ahead and get straight into game 1 here. I'm super excited to see these 2 teams go ahead and face off. As Dolson just said, I'm joined here by Gore. Hello, Gore. It's a pleasure to be casting with you.
I'm excited to watch it. It's one thing to be able to come forward, and I always think it's a pleasure to watch Belts, even though they'd most come in that from the out to be. But I'm getting watching go. I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we see Trix Tank on this Fafnir, I think, fairly often when he's kind of putting on a serious face, going, okay, well, I know a pick that's going to make people terrified. Pulls out that Fafnir just to kind of give him a little bit of extra comfort, I think, but I'm just going to go and start looking towards these purple buffs. Now, looking at these 2 comps, Gore, what kind of things are we looking for Pikarinoobs to do and for Belt Slap to kind of, like, achieve over the course of this game?
Well, for Pikarinoobs, at least in my mind, it's try to do what they had mentioned there in picks and bans on the desk. Abuse the early game as much as you can. You know Johnny's a huge factor, and you know that Ao Kwang's a late game hyper carry. So utilize this Pele as much as you can. Around level 5, you're going to have Hera start getting into the mix. And your Cabrakan is just aggressive, right? You have 3 picks that I think this early on in the first, 10 minutes of the game should control the pace of it. And I love that they're already going for red buffs, right? Just making sure that you kind of make Belt Slap play your game and don't let them just sit back and be comfortable. That's how you get ahead. Then you just have to hold on to it as tight as you can. You have to hope that that lead doesn't disappear when Johnny finally comes online.
Well, I mean, speaking of trying to put some pressure onto Pikarinoobs, making them feel uncomfortable, Cabrakan going to be picking up that red buff that Belt Slap just stole away from Pikarinoobs, so looking to see Alka trying to make some fancy plays over here in the left side lane. So, I mean, okay, right. Over here on the right side, we talked earlier, hold on, actually, that thought as a blink from Julio already, putting the pressure onto Oti. The blink there already? Is that a normal thing that we see?
I think from Julio, yes. I don't know if that's really like kill potential. I'm kind of surprised to see him just throw it out there for the sake of throwing it out there, especially considering we had mentioned against Amaterasu, he's really just hoping to not lose lane, although signature pick for Julio, so we might end up seeing him maybe even flourish a little bit of a couple of kills over in his favor. But for the most part, especially here for Captain Odi, both of them are just going to stall out the lane. When it comes to late-game team presence, I like Amaterasu a little bit better. I think Julio's going to have a lot more pick presence, but with Pikarino specifically being able to kind of self-peel, Davey being on a relatively safe hunter as well, I think Julio's going to have his work cut out for him when it comes to the late game and making sure that he has that impact. So if he can find something early, go for it, but for the most part, I think he's just trying to scare off Captain Odi. Use that old, well, just presence. You know you're Belt Slap, you know you're Julio, and you know you're on one of your most feared gods. Just kind of make sure that Captain Odi knows it too.
For sure, and well, like you said, I'm sure we'll see Captain OT try and probably play it a little bit safer on this Amy. Definitely more of a late game kind of a pick. Yeah. But as for everyone else, people just farming at the moment, just trying to feel each other out. I don't think Alka has really made too much of a play with this red buff, but I don't really think, on the flip side of that Pikarinoobs really have a lot of pressure in this lane, especially against the Jingwei Fafnir.
Yeah, this is a little worrisome for me. When you come into this, again, you had asked earlier, what can Pikarinoobs do to really bring themselves ahead, and a lot of it was take control of this early game. And they got that red buff invade, and nothing since then. In fact, the gold's now starting to shift over in favor of Belt Slap. It's getting frightening at this point. If you were just farming for, let's say, 20 minutes, yeah, a European standard, right? You're farming for 15 minutes, then the fight starts. Then, all of a sudden, everything's going to come up Belt Slap. You're going to have Johnny online with a lot of damage. You're going to have everything available to you.
Well, sorry, hold that thought real quick, Gore, as the blink in from Alka is going to try and force Sank out there from Alkal, and going to pop the beads is the Mr. Flyboy there, and he's going to be able to get himself safe with that updraft, but I mean, Alka tried to do something, like you said, like trying to find this pressure, but I would have liked to have seen them go for potentially the re-invade on the red buff as well, just to try and keep up with that farm.
Yeah, it's that question of where they're going to be able to put this aggression. And unfortunately, Alka blinking in onto Trix Tank. Trix Tank is just going to hammer stun you, and then they have enough CC and enough disengage that they're not stressed about it. In fact, Alka, at that point, was the one who almost died there. Now he's starting to follow just a little bit behind Trix Tank in terms of farm. That's already starting to stress me out a little for the duo lane. I mean, you don't pick this Cabrakan to have a slow roll late game impact, although he will still hit like a truck in the late game. You really are trying to just force Arkle into an uncomfortable position, force Trix Tank to make bad decisions. And so far, again, that duo lane hasn't been doing much. Also, I'm a little upset that Rapio hasn't really been doing anything. I mean, Pele maybe isn't going to make a huge splash early on, but with Julio as aggressive as he is, this is your chance to really try and make this pick shine.
Well, you say that, but obviously just waiting to get those boots online, and with the ultimate available as well for Rapio, I think we might start to see him show a little bit more presence, but of course, as soon as I say that, he decides, I see Julio in the right side jungle. I'm just gonna give him some space. It's fine. He's a big scary tier. But yeah, now that he's got that ultimate available, that volcanic lightning, I think maybe we could see him start to look towards this duo lane a little bit more.
Yeah, I'd like to see him just anywhere on the map at this point. I think it'll be probably easiest to deal with. I say easiest to deal with the duo lane. I don't think anybody on Belt Slap is going to be easy to deal with. You know, maybe easy to lock down zeros, but then Persephone, especially if she's set up in lane, all of a sudden turns it on you and you're dead in 2 seconds. Same thing can be said over here. If you could get aggressive into Arkle, I think that might be an opening now that Trixtank is rotated away from the duo lane. And you can kind of see Alka's over here. It feels like the presence from Pikarinoobs is starting to mount up on the left-hand side. And it's going to be important because this first pop-off, you know, 6 minutes in now, could pretty easily lead to a Gold Fury.
Well, yeah, and they're definitely looking for it, as it looks like Hera's going to get caught out in the jungle here, but the turnaround from Rapio is going to be good. Joni is actually going to be the one to fall down, but now coming over the wall is Julio. The Lawbringer is going to be good to hit 2 people trying to escape around the side. Rapio, no way! Fearless back into the red pit there, and no escape for either junglers. Both of them are going to fall down, and now it's one Trixtank versus the world. He's going to be transforming back into the jungle, but 2 more kills on the side of Pikarinoobs, picking up not only a mid laner, but a support as well. That's going to be a really good look and potentially an opening for an objective.
A really good look, and also the start you need, right? I mean, you're coming into this fight, you have that early game advantage, and even though things aren't as clean as you want, your jungler still goes down, you get maybe the 3 most important picks on Belt Slap at this phase, right? You get rid of Johnny, slow down his farm a little bit, Zero, slow down his farm a little bit, and Trixtank, who is going to be the one that I think could help turn these fights around. So right now, already starting to control Belt Slap. Unfortunately, not a lot of time afterward. No Pyromancer available yet because it's too early in the game. And trying to burn down a Gold Fury when you still have Arkle available, it was a little shifty for him. They just didn't have the timing working in their favor.
No, not quite. But so, yeah, as you said, they're not going to be able to pick up anything. In fact, Belt Slap are the ones pressing the objective, going to steal away this blue buff by the looks of things, and Pikarino not quite... Rapio not quite able to secure his own blue buff as 3 people rotate just specifically to deny it from Captain Oti, which I think is a really good call against this Amaterasu.
I liked the little dance between Julio and Trixtank as to who's going to take it. Like, whose blue buff is this really? Trixtank ultimately getting it. And I think it's going to be helpful here. A little bit of cooldown means that Hammer will be up a little more often. Not a lot of kill potential still for Belt Slap. I just keep peeking down. Right now, until Johnny, you know, 1 finishes off this ring, but maybe even picks up another, I don't know that we're really going to get to see him be as impactful of a jungler as we kind of have grown to expect out of him. I mean, he's got, I think, the highest KDA pretty much all year throughout the Challenger circuit in Europe. And again, he's been the one person that every time I cast Belt Slap, I always say I would do anything to not mention his name as long as possible. And it doesn't matter because then late game he's getting triple kills anyway, and you have to talk about him. I think right now, you know, he finishes that ring of Kate. This is where he's maybe going to find his comfort.
For sure, but until then, it's going to be Belt Slap once again under some duress. Zero's already falling down before we even get a chance to talk about the fight, but up into the sky goes Ulka, but in trade-off, Trixtank is going to fall as well. Johnny does find one. He's going to land back down here, just around the mid lane, trying to do some more damage to Rapio, but Blinking from Julio now. The Soul Laners have made their rotation over. Lawbringer coming down, hitting 2, but the Polymorph is going to be on the mark to keep them away, rolling through Davey. Not quite going to be able to save the life of the Hunters. Arkle is going to pick him off, and now potentially either looking for this mid tower, or I would have maybe liked to have seen them try to rush down this Gold Fury instead.
I think they could have done it, but you can see the spacing of it. Specifically, Johnny wanted to get aggressive, and they're looking to strip away farm. And this is great, I think, for Belt Slap, because they could just showcase that they will win a fight if they have to. They can still control the pace and the flow of these games. So take away the farm. Do what you have been hoping to see Pikarinoobs, or what I've been hoping to see Pikarinoobs do. And instead, in retaliation, I honestly thought Johnny was going to go even deeper and look for more kills. But I like the fact that they just turn it, grab the purple buff, grab the XP camps in the back Harpies, and just keep yourselves on par, because you're down 2 kills at this point, but it's almost no gold. I mean, maybe 100, and that's going to fluctuate wave to wave. So for the most part, you are perfectly happy if you're Belt Slap right now going into this. You're just still trying to focus on getting that farm online. It's unfortunate for Zeros to be 0-2 because he's maybe the one hurting the most, 2 levels down. But outside of that, everybody else is doing fine.
For sure, although, well, I'm not sure the same thing can be said for Arkle just yet. There's no ultimate available for him. Up into the sky goes the Rama, and it's going to be big boy Kabrakin finding the Hunter, but this beautiful support work from Trixtank is keeping him alive. Valkyl's gonna get the turnaround, and now here comes the Bramble Thorns push from Persephone to keep away Davey. He's not gonna be able to make it into the fight in time. Oh my goodness, how did Trixtank keep Arkle alive for so long there?
He's just good. There's no other way to highlight it. I mean, it's just good CC as well as good juke shoes from Arkle. I mean, kind of broke Alka's ankles on that one trying to keep up with him. But the fact that they pull that back, like, it's still a fight that goes in favor of Pikarinoobs. I think killing Arkle's a little more favorable than getting rid of Alka just because of the way supports are. But then you start to factor in a couple of other things, right? Arkle getting a return kill. That's going to be big for this Hunter. He's got a level up now over Davey. Alka is a level behind, almost 2 levels behind Trixtank. And so these little plays that are still getting pulled back in favor of Beltslap, even if they're not fully favorable, have ended up helping them more than anything Pikarinoobs can do. So I think it's unfortunate for them that they're not able to lock that kill down as easily as they wanted. And honestly, if they hadn't rotated as fast as they did, they might have ended up just losing Alka and keeping Arkle alive. So they have to be really careful now on this dual lane because they're showing no fear. Arkle has been in the heart of a fight too many times to let that kind of thing get to him. And now that his ult is down, maybe you have a window of opportunity, but only a few seconds to work with before it comes back up.
I mean, we were saying about how maybe the dual lane needs to be a little bit less aggressive. Trixtank, in fact, decides to completely disregard your advice. He goes, there is a purple buff that I would quite like, and also a red buff potentially, and hold on the other side of the map, Johnny's just getting a kill onto Repio, just completely, apparently decimating him. I didn't even see the health bar go down in time.
Yeah, I think that's just going to be the case. He finished Ring of Hecate, and it's not the same power spike it used to be. It did get hit with some nerfs, but at the same time, it's Johnny on a comfort pick with an item now that has enabled him to at least exist on the map. Now that he's going to be able to finish off a second ring, looking at this last few seconds of farm, however much he's going to have, he'll be able to back up, and then we're going to start seeing his name crop up in the kill feed a lot more often. Give him an execute. Alka and Odie are going to be stressed out. Pikarino should be stressed out a little bit from that because once you get rid of Hera, all of a sudden you're not too worried about Argus anymore. And now that's where the pressure's mounting.
Yeah, definitely pressure. Down comes Argus to try and help out Pikarino, but two members of Beltslap here trying to focus down the mid laner, but here comes the rest of Pikarino. They're trying to help him out, but over the wall goes Julio, down falls Pikarino, but now the rest of the team are coming in. Davey is going to pick up Trixtank here, and up into the sky goes the Rama once again. Repio does pick up Julio, so it's a 2-for-1 trade here in favor of Pikarino's once again, but really, I think this is definitely a win for Beltslap, picking up the 2 levels ahead Hera.
Yeah, being able to at least get some farm online, and now watching Zero slowly but surely catch up. Unfortunately, it does still leave you in the numbers disadvantage, and so Pyromancer easy to pick up. Maybe Arkle easy to pick up. He has virtually no mana to try and get away here.
Well, he does have his ultimate, so he's still sitting pretty as far as I'm concerned, as Davey went back to attempt to save his tier 1 tower, but going to be in vain, and it's going to fall down, giving Beltslap just a little bit of extra pocket change to keep pushing forward that gold lead that they've just been slowly building up throughout this game, even when they're slightly behind.
Yeah, I think they've, again, just been holding on to this. The fact that Beltslap still have a small lead is ridiculous to me, considering what Pikarinoobs have been able to do. And that just showcases where their farm has been going, and more importantly, like you had highlighted, the kills they're getting and who they're taking care of. You can lose both your frontliners, and you're still fine with it as of right now. You know, picking off Alka just opens up opportunities for you if you're Beltslap. But they're getting to Pikarino pretty consistently. They've been able to get to Rapio consistently. And once you start dealing with the jungler and the mid laner in these fights, you're not really stressed about anything.
No, absolutely not, especially when you have so much burn for this Gold Fury. Pikarino's not even given the time to respond to that, as Beltslap are just going to completely melt it down for gold.
And this is now starting to teeter into territory where I think Pikarinoobs are going to be uncomfortable, right? Johnny's all of a sudden starting to be an impact player, so Rapio, that window of opportunity where he was kind of the only jungler on the board, is closing rapidly on him. You're starting to see Zeros at this point be impactful because he's Persephone at level 14. He's just hit that threshold where he can finally start being a little more part of this, now finishing that Divine Ruin as well. I expect to see more out of him. And the thing that's kind of surprised me the most, and maybe it shouldn't have, is because this move speed tier that Julio has brought in has just been rotating like crazy. I mean, he's been impactful in every single fight that's been going on for Belt Slap, and he's not afraid to just all of a sudden show up in the duo lane.
Absolutely, and it's one of the things that I think tier specifically brings so much, is that he is just able, like you said, to find these rotations super easily, especially with that speed build that we've been seeing so popular on tiers recently. But looking over onto this left lane, it looks like Belt Slap are looking to collapse once again onto Pikarinoobs. The wall comes down from Alka, but I'm not sure it's going to be enough to save his life, as just going so deep now, our Belt Slap up into the sky goes Alka. He's going to fall down to the dragon, Omanomanom. Now it's going to be pretty much all over for Davey. Not really any place that he can run. Does pop the ultimate, though. Not really sure it was worth it. I personally would have just saved the snipe there.
I think he was trying to prolong it, and you could actually see, I'm happy we saw it from Johnny's perspective, because he was looking. The minute that ult comes out from Davey, it's like, all right, who's coming to save you? Oh, no one? All right, fine, we'll just continue harassing this duo lane. The minute nobody on Pikarinoobs was rotating over, that became a death for certain over there in the duo lane. Although it's still probably going to be a death. It was just whether or not somebody could come through and try to pick some scraps up. Unfortunately for them, it wasn't anything. Arkle, it's always a bad sign if you see the enemy carry turn around when they're at half health, and then they decide to continue fighting you. And I think that's the presence. Unfortunately, Alka and Davey just haven't really had a commanding lead over there in the duo lane. And now Trixtank, Arkle, both feeling very confident in themselves, and of course now in Johnny, it's making it so much easier to get aggressive. That one Pyromancer we saw Pikarinoobs get means virtually nothing anymore.
Yeah, for sure. And, well, I mean, they could be claiming some scrap of a lead back, as they do manage to pick off zeros here in the mid lane, but ultimate now coming through from the dead Persephone. Obviously, that passive keeping her in the fight for just a few seconds, even after her untimely demise. Julio does show presence once again, as we've said. This tier just always seems to find himself inside the fight somehow at some point in time. But Captain OT's here too, so it's not like he's going uncontested, and this could look like a potential tier 1 tower for Pikarinoobs. Oh, no,
that's that awkward moment of, like, how aggressive do we want to get, and is it going to be worth it? Like, you have to factor that in. It's so weird because, you know, Johnny wasn't really in the area. It didn't seem like anybody from Belt Slap was willing to contend for it. They would have lost the tower if it had really been that way, but I think Pikarinoobs recognized that taking that much damage and being left on the board then for Arkle and Johnny, who are coming back into the fight, is probably not the cleanest idea. Unfortunately, again, for Pikarinoobs, I need to see him start being a little more proactive, because right now, it feels like Johnny's making the decisions. Julio's making the decisions that are affecting Pikarinoobs. I haven't seen a really heads-up play come from Alka. You know, that last engage was good onto Zeros, but they invest so much and get so little out of it. You know, one kill, and granted it's on one of the best mid laners they've played against, it's just still, you need a little more.
Yeah, I also want to highlight, we haven't really seen too much action from Rapio other than him falling down here over in the right-hand side. It seems like a pattern, and it doesn't look like Alka's going to be far behind him. Up into the sky goes the dragon, but I'm not really sure he's going to find anything. Actually goes deep, joining his solo lane. I'm going to pick up Pikarino, and I'm not really sure there's anywhere Davey can go dead before he even takes to the sky. Johnny's little stealth pool there, going to finish him off. Don't drown, Mr. Rama Man.
Yeah, you get a huge wipe like that. Julio is chasing Odie all across the world at this point. I'd actually be surprised if this isn't a fire giant.
Yeah, that's a fire.
For Belt Slap, because at this point you have such a distinct advantage. We had mentioned the burn with the Gold Fury. You're going to see just as much here on Fire Giant, but it's still, you know, 19 minutes. It's going to take a little bit of time. But with only 4 towers still up, team fights going the way they are, that's starting to feel like a death sentence. You know, it feels like there's very little time left in the game if Belt Slap keep getting fights going this way.
For sure, I think at this point, Pikarinoobs kind of have to do exactly what AJ said earlier in the desk segment there, and just try and pull a puppies. Maybe just try and find one really good fight under Phoenix, try and get a decent defense, and then just go from there and hope that you can claw back. But Pikarinoobs definitely looking like they're in a rough situation here, for sure.
Yeah. Especially since Johnny's been willing to not only help pick people off, but we just saw it in the last fight, he'll dive. Like, he does not care about having his health bar go down if it means he's going to be able to walk away with 2 or 3 kills. And so I think that makes it even more dangerous to try and play against him, because now you're getting shredded by this Ao Kwang, who's finished off yet another item that's going to allow him even more versatility, I think, in his dive potential. And so he is now deadlier than ever. Arkel's getting to the point where his late game build is going to be hitting incredibly hard. And with Fire Giant, if you're a tank, you're not going to have a good time against this Jingwei. And your towers aren't going to last that long either. And that's the grouping right now. I mean, if you're Pikarinoobs, I don't know if you can save any of these.
No, I think the call should definitely be here. Hey guys, let's just defend the Phoenixes. All right, we'll give up the towers, but I'm not really sure they're gonna have that option, as everyone was seemingly in the right hand side trying to pick up that tier 2 in Belt Slap's solo lane, but are able to pull around the defense Pikarinoobs, but it's gonna cost them Alka, which is probably the biggest ultimate that they had in this defense, and pushing into the Phoenix is the attempt here. Argus is going to fall down, and falling back our Belt Slap. Dazzling Offensive is going to pick up Julio, but the beats is going to be strong, and the turnaround with the Persephone is going to keep OT from running away. Arkill claims credit for that kill, and now Belt Slap are going to keep on pushing.
And this Phoenix is already taken to half because of their push earlier, and Davies out of the fight. They're just going to be able to get aggressive. That should at least be a left Phoenix.
Absolutely, and I mean, continuing to push, they have no fear here. This could even be the game, Gore. Arkel picks up Ulka, only just barely escaping to the fountain with his life goes Pikarino. Bellslap, though, they're choosing to take the slightly more safe approach, potentially going for this mid-Phoenix before deciding to siege up the Titan, but instead looking like they might just retreat. Oh, sorry. No, the tier 2 in mid is still alive. I even forgot that. Heck.
Yeah, that's that moment where they're so aggressive that it feels like it should be the end, but they still have that one tower, now another tower over there in right lane. They won't be able to go for that trifecta in terms of Phoenixes. But sometimes 2 is enough. If they finish off that last tier 2, it's purely for gold at this point. But, I mean, they get 2 Phoenixes, they strip away the jungle at this point, the speed buff, which I would say is maybe the most important here for Rapio to get back into this. Red buff going down. Yeah, maybe you don't get that last tier 2 tower, but you get everything else Pikarinoobs had available to him, and Johnny still wants another kill, even, to be able to hang out over here. You still have a minute and a half on Fire Giant. Belt Slap are more than comfortable and still in a very easy win condition for the game.
Oh, Davey. He's going to go for it. Julio, unfortunately, not going to be able to hit the Lawbringer, but I'm not sure it's going to matter. Power Cleave is going to finish up the life of the ADC. How does it feel to get soloed 22 minutes into the game as an ADC? Oh, he's going for more!
He's just not done. This is something, so the best way I can word this is if you ever see a solo laner doing this and he's not paying for it with his life, then things are too out of hand for you.
Julio's out. He's gonna get out of this goal.
He's alive still.
He's so
He's
out.
going back in!
He's coming back in! What is he doing, Julio? What are you doing? This man is absolutely mental. He's going on to Ulka, who, I mean, hey, he's taking so much damage from this tier, even as a support, so I can see the merit of it, and it's just creating space for the rest of Belt Slap to attempt to push into this right Phoenix, and now Arkill starting off the party here by taking up the life of Rapio. Second kill there for Arkill. The Hunter picks up number 2, potentially third one there, but Julio's going to steal it away. He's finally finishing up that kill onto the Kraken that he started over in the left-hand side, and now with 3 Phoenixes down, I'm not really sure there's anywhere to go for Pikarinoobs, but into the ground as Lawbringer comes down. Fearless 2 out of the fountain. No escape for you guys. You don't even get to save your KDA. Down falls the Titan, and game 1 goes very securely, very handsomely into the palms of Belt Slap.
So what was that, like 2-3 minutes over there that Julio bought for his team to take a tier, like they were back in base, so they walk all the way up to a tier 2, take the tier 2, almost take the Phoenix, and then finally the fight starts to rotate over towards the right. He bought a lot of time there for them, and again, at that point, Belt Slap was so ahead, not only was he just undying, he had 4 members of Pikarinoobs looking at him, but they were able to walk around. And it's not surprising to see it go so heavily out of hand. Once that Ao Kuang got online, Pikarinoobs didn't have enough of a lead to really pull the reins back in their favor, and unfortunately, it just snowballed.
Yeah, it was just kind of insane to watch. As we saw, you know, every time that Pikarinoobs got even like a little smidgen, a little wedge of extra pocket change, it just felt like Belt Slap were just like, well, we're just going to out-farm you, so it doesn't matter how well that you do, but... I mean, I don't know about you, Gore, but I'm super excited to see what Game 2 looks like, but we will have to wait just a little bit, as we are going to have a quick word from these messages.
Take a deeper breath and give it time. You can walk the path among the lines. But Always know that you'll be safe. I'll be here throughout your days. Come find me and we will play.
Flowers that bloom in the darkness. It's a sighting that is rare to come across. Nobody seems to have noticed that the power that could be bestowed is lost, riding through the twilight. This armory protects my heart.
That's about as belt slap of a win as it gets here in the early game. It looks like there's a chance that Pikarinoobs 2 is going to roll this one their own direction. Belt slap hold strong, keep themselves in it. Alpha Jackal still with me to break down game number one. What'd you see here, AJ? I mean, Pikarinoobs brought it in the early game, but belt slap held on and kind of rolled them in 23 minutes.
Pikarinoobs 2 did exactly what they needed to do, which was get the early game aggression in that dual lane side. Got that first rep buff in mid-round, but they let Julio get tier. And I think as our eardrums get bursted a bit, we can see exactly why that's an issue.
Yeah, he kind of just rotated early and often out of the solo lane, didn't he? And Johnny was there as well to help set up a lot of the kills. So it was kind of that 1-2 punch, I think, that belt slap were able to capitalize on. I really like the direction that Julio goes with this build as well. Kind of the move speed tier gets him involved early. But it's got to be criminal in some capacity, one guy controlling this much of the game. I mean, the two-man knockbacks, the ultimates were connecting pretty consistently. And so now you wonder if it's something Pikarinoobs 2 have to worry about going into the next wave of picks and bans.
I think they have to have an answer for it before he even picks it to stop him from picking it. And he only had one death that entire game. I think that was quite early on as well, maybe even towards the mid portion of the game. But it didn't even matter at that point. I mean, level 2, he is blinking onto an Amaterasu just to get a bit more damage off and poke him out. You don't expect that from anybody except from Julio.
That does not bode well for you when that's how this game is starting. Arkle, of course, benefited largely due to the pressure of the rest of his team there. 7-1 on his kills and deaths there for himself. 16,000 damage only behind Julio here in this game, closing in on that 17,000 mark. And honestly, Pikarinoobs 2, they sort of played around, I think, what you figured they would need to, Alpha Jackal, and that was Zeros being somewhat susceptible in that early game. I mean, Zeros, he was there, he was doing, some decent damage come the mid to late game, but largely mitigated. I mean, the route into this game was that the Hera was, 2 levels up here at some point? At one point, rather, but at some point, it's just too difficult to deal with, this out Kwang that's now starting to get fed, the tier that's just too strong, and when tier is 2-3 levels up on basically everyone on your team and just sort of walking at you, there's no way to go except back to the fountain and maybe back into picks and bans for game number 2. So you talked about maybe there needing to be some sort of counter to this tier if they're going to let Julio play it again. In your mind, what might that be?
That That's the issue. There isn't really a counter to tier in lane.
Fair
he just sustains in lane, and that's it. You just go, well, he's got his Fearless Power Cleave combo. I guess it's a draw. You could go something to equal that sort of impact in the late game. That's what the Amaterasu was kind of there for. Just got a bit swept aside, so maybe something a bit more resilient. You can go a Xing Chen, a Kumbhakana, if you're really looking to go deep into the God pool. Could also, on the flip side, go for something a bit different. Go for an Ares in the solo lane. Could even go for an Ares in the support. Or just ban the tier away altogether.
Or just ban it. Yep.
That's also the option.
And not going to matter here as far as specific tier counters, is Julio is going to have to play something different. Tier takes a seat thanks to Pikarinoobs too, who are going to be over in that first pick spot this time around. Some more bans from Belt Slap here. Nemesis, whether it's against Johnny or Rapio, is still going to draw enough attention, I think, just because of the strength of the god at the moment, to make her worthy of a ban. Amaterasu banned out, so we're going to see a totally new solo lane matchup this time around. Olarun still not available, thanks to Belt Slap here. So Pikarinoobs 2 in that first pick slot here. No Cthulhu. They got a lot to play with as far as a lot of strength left available in that god pool.
I mean, they could do what Belt Slap did in the first game, which is take away the Persephone as that first pick choice.
They could.
And that's exactly what they're hovering right now. They could look to take Yemoja. Remember, that got all the way to the second round of bans before even being banned. But the Persephone is going to be the mid laner of choice. They did manage to do well against Persephone, so Belt Slap do have the blueprint right there in front of them. It is something that they can look to replicate themselves. So I'm looking for them to get pressure. Maybe just take the ROM away from them.
Yeah, the Yemoja, I think, as you point out, still available. The Sobek is where my mind was going to go as well. Banned out by Pikarinoobs 2 in game number 1, left open for Trix Tank here in game number 2. So a strong pivot there, I think, from Belt Slap. And there's still this ROM. So, I mean, you could just lock in all of your duo lane here at this point and maybe be happy about it if you're Belt Slapping. It is going to end up being the ROM snagged. So you talk about putting some early game pressure maybe onto this Persephone in the mid lane. Once Sobek gets to that point where he's feeling a little bit more free to rotate around, these Plucks are very good at setting up some individual kills.
Yeah, I don't expect Pikarinoobs to be able to live in the mid lane for very long, or even stay under the tower safely. I mean, Pikarino's just going to get plucked consistently by Trix Tank from level 3 onwards. The Achilles pick, we have seen him play it in the jungle. We have seen Johnny play Achilles jungle, but I think that was more of a forced pick the last time he had to play it. And that was against the Pappies in a game that they ended up losing. So I'm thinking it's going to be Achilles solo. Quite an early draft pick here for Julio. Just heed the hot hand. If he wants to play Achilles, say, you know what, fine, have the Achilles.
That's right. It'll be over there for Pikarinoobs 2 this time around. So looking for some sort of answer back now is Belt Slap. And I wonder if Pikarinoobs 2... All right, so now it is a Thoth locked in for Zeros out of the mid lane. We know that he definitely holds this god in very high regard. So this maybe opens the door for Pikarinoobs 2 to start this wave of jungle bans, though it is difficult against Johnny, whether you ban out the Kali, the Bakasura. Apparently there's an Ao Kuang waiting around the other side. You really have to think long and hard about what you want to play against here, I think, if you're the Pikarinoobs 2. Instead, Belt Slap, they're going to ban out the Kibo again. This time won't be their first ban. It's going to fall down to that second wave. But let's talk about this Thoth here for a little bit. Belt Slap getting Zeros onto the Thoth. What do you think of him out of the mid lane?
I think it's probably one of his strongest, if not his strongest god. I mean, it is a long-range, safe mage that can farm up very easily, and that's exactly what Zeros likes to play and how he likes to do the game. He wants to just farm, he wants to kill you from a distance, and he wants to farm some more. He wants to be the most fed person on the map by far, and just take everything for himself and still kill you for it. You could do that with Thoth.
Yeah, that's kind of his whole MO, I guess. So strong pick there for Belt Slap. Kind of that rotating 3 of the Kali, the Ao Kuang, and the Bakasura. 2 of them are going to get taken away, the Kali and the Ao Kuang. Still need a jungler for the Pikarinoobs 2, so maybe could edge in on some of Johnny's territory there if they want with these next 2, but it's going to be a Sun Wukong. Again, presumably to answer back to this Achilles out of the solo lane. If that is truly the solo lane matchup we're going to get here, what do you think, or how do you make of that one? Johnny, or Julio rather, kind of had his way in game number 1. Sun Wukong, do you think, able to do that to an Achilles here?
I think Sun Wukong is kind of underrated in the solo lane right now. Does quite a hefty amount of damage, very safe, and is there primarily for disruption to the backline. He wants to just get on top of a god like Persephone, on top of a god like Jingwei, is able to do that very easily, and then just lives because he is Sun Wukong, gets away with either going into his transformations or because he just flies away at the speed of sound. But the Thor pick is kind of interesting. It is, a Rapios-centric god, but could also very slightly be played into the solo lane, into the Wukong instead, if they want to put Achilles into the jungle, if they needed that execute around elsewhere.
Man, and it is Bakasura locked in now for Johnny to round out the draft for Belt Slap. Does that kind of tilt things over towards Belt Slap for you? You think they have the better draft? We can uncover the team names this time. We got to look at the players as well, maybe for the analysis on this one. Do you think Belt Slap get away with the draft that snags them the first win of the weekend here?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a 2-0. There's nothing much more to say about it other than the fact that they got 3-4 of their signature picks and are just going to basically have their way with Pikarinoobs 2 here.
It's the early game in game 1 where Pikarinoobs 2 could put out some pressure onto Belt Slap, but they couldn't build up on that gold lead. They'll need to do that and then some in game number 2 if they want to stay alive against Belt Slap. Blazy and Gormizer will take us on into game number 2.
Thanks again, Dolson. I am really interested to see these two comps. I'm specifically looking at, hey, coming up from Pikarinoobs alongside the Jijoni Bakasura. Gormeister, what do you think of these picks?
Man, I think I'll see you in set number 2 because I see Johnny on Bakasura, and I know how this goes. It's the same story every time he gets this pick. I think it's going to be very difficult for Pikarinoobs to handle it, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. A lot of what they have, similar to last game, is aggressive, but a little safer this time around, right? You can be aggressive with this Achilles and still make it out. You can be aggressive with Thor and still make it out alive. The same thing over there for Alka and Davey. And so that's kind of what I want to see them. I want to see them fight a little bit more, still in the early game if I'm Pikarinoobs. But I think they have the propensity to be able to get aggressive like they did last game, but not lose as much if things don't go their way.
For sure, and I think especially looking over here in this duo lane, they've got they picked up Jingwei this time, and alongside it they have the Kuzenbo, which, as you said, is a lot safer than Kobraken, but kind of fills that same role, right? Like he wants to be really aggressive, he wants to be really in your face, doing damage to you, exactly like he's doing right now to Arkle, who's already forced to pop beads. It's knocked up there by Davey, so that's already a whole heck of a bunch of damage onto Arkle, and that's exactly the kind of thing we want to see from Alka.
It's all I want to see out of Pikarinoobs. I want that the entire time. If you can pressure Belt Slap right now, do it. Because for the next 10 minutes, that's your window. Once Johnny finishes a couple of items, that Bakasura is just going to be scary. It's going to be the same pace as last game, but maybe accelerated. I think we can see Bakasura start to come online a little bit sooner, and it's just... I always hate when it comes down to this because it feels like it's almost inevitable for Belt Slap to pull the lead over in their favor. But I've seen Johnny on this Bakasura. It's one of the picks that for a long time was banned out against him. I mean, you'd see Kali bans, Bakasura bans, Ao Kwang bans, always against Belt Slap, because if it meant letting other people on the team being comfortable, at least you limited Johnny.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely does feel like Pikarinoobs are on a bit of a ticking clock, but so far so good, I suppose. They are, well, actually, scratch that. I was about to say they found themselves a small little gold lead, but no, once again, and it's Belt Slap just farming just that little bit more efficiently, picking up already about a 200 gold lead, about a minute and a half in, which is going to be something, but Trix Tank looks like he could have been pressured out a little bit there, but it was just shy of being pushed onto tower, so again, just a bit more of a slap fest over here in the duo lane.
Both carries at this point need to be worried. Davey a little less so, just because Jingwei versus Sobek, you have a lot easier time to disengage. Still has his beads up as well, so he's going to be able to kind of flex around. Arkle's beads are still down for another minute, and I happen to see a Thor in the area. I want to see this pressure get turned around, but instead he's back into base. I actually wanted to see maybe Pikarinoobs go for an early rotation. If both the mid lane, if Pikarino and Rapio go over there, maybe they're able to force Belt Slap at least to play defensively and get some pressure back in their duo lane, which at this point should have had pressure. I mean, especially after the way things started, the fact that they're having to defend their purple buff, it's insane to me.
For sure, and it definitely looks like Belt Slap haven't And we are back. So sorry for the delay, ladies and gentlemen, but let's jump straight back into this game as we're seeing Alka potentially falling down here in defense of his purple buff, but thanks to some support from his ADC, Davy's going to chase away the bad boys from Belt Slap. Welcome back, Gore. How you doing?
Doing pretty good, and still surprised to see Belt Slap this aggressive. Like, I guess, okay, that's maybe not the right term. I'm not surprised to see Belt Slap being aggressive. I'm surprised to see them being so successfully aggressive against a composition that feels like it should be more aggressive against them. Pikarinoobs, unfortunately, and maybe Alka most of all, kind of in that spot where he's the one receiving more damage than he's been able to dish out after that kind of early gank we saw earlier. But Rapio might be able to turn this around.
Potentially, does land down, forces the beads out of the Rama. Now it's going to be Trixtank who's in trouble. Falls down to about a third HP, and thanks to a nice wall from Rapio, they are going to pick up that kill, securing first blood for this team. So that's going to be huge already, potentially. Just skyrocketing Pikarinoobs just to that little bit of a lead. Actually, cancel that. It's just barely canceled out Belt Slap Slay that they've been building up these last 5 minutes.
Yeah, that was the thing, before the break you had kind of mentioned that there was a gold lead being built up, or it wasn't by Pikarinoobs. Belt Slap still managed to be just a smidge ahead throughout all of that. And so I think better for them now to be in a position where you're at least nullifying something of it, but even then, wave to wave, it's going to vary a couple of hundred. But the fact that Belt Slap continually find themselves being slightly ahead of Pikarinoobs, even though things don't go their way, even with first blood bounty, it's making me worry even more so for that Bakasura late game. He's just sitting around and farming. It's a ticking time bomb that is Johnny. And I think it's even worse when you start to factor in the other things. Julio is going to be able to start making these rotations on the Wukong, and that's going to be big team fight presence. I think that Zeros is, much like you would expect out of a Thoth, only going to get better with time. I think Belt Slap just have a good late game team comp, and Pikarinoobs need to slow them down as much as possible and take this advantage and do something with it.
Well, what kind of things should they be looking to do to slow them down? I mean, it doesn't look like Belt Slap have any plans to do that themselves. So how are Pikarinoobs supposed to find this this metaphorical break bar?
Well, more pressure from Rapio, which I think is maybe going to be more oriented around the ult. We haven't seen a lot of just blank ganks coming down from a Thor, really. It's only been ults, and now that he has that online, maybe it's going to open up that avenue to try and lock it down. But then you have to look at who he's trying to lock down. It is going to be difficult to deal with Zeros. It feels like a lot of the pressure they do have can be applied onto the duo lane between Rapio and Alka. I think there's a lot of pressure that can be had there, but Alka, I don't think I've really seen him get a push onto anybody since the first portion of the game. Maybe he got a second one there onto Arkle, but there hasn't been a lot of pressure from the Kuzenbo just yet. And the Thor, while he's been impactful for 1 kill, I want to see that snowball into 2, into 3. I want to see a little more out of that, whether it's just walking up, throwing down your wall, and hoping for the best, or if it is from an ult in the Gold Fury pit like he did last time.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think we should be seeing Rapio trying to make something happen pretty much on cooldown with this ultimate to kind of capitalize off this semi-early aggression that we see potentially in the right side lane. I mean, we've already seen OT being able to put a fair amount of pressure onto Julio already, putting him into that ult range twice now so far from what I've seen. So potentially looking for a gank over there, putting Julio a little bit behind, or maybe even over on the other side again, trying to just put Arkle even further behind.
Anything that can get, yeah, like you said, Arkle further behind, anybody further behind. At this point last game, we had specifically seen Pikarino start to get a little bit more of a lead, and that was because of pressure onto Zeros, and I think on Thoth they're just going to have a little more trouble locking him down. But Pikarino doesn't have that big of a lead. There's actually a small lead there for Johnny, even though Odie has a small lead over Julio. So it's these small trades, but I'd take my solo laner being down half a level more than I'd take my jungler being down half a level. I think now that the Golden Blade's online, the farm's going to become a little more consistent overall for this Bakasura, and we're going to start seeing Johnny, again, pick up a second, or I guess second, his third item, whichever one, if you want to count boots or not, and he's going to be able to come through and just start tearing down Pikarinoobs. And unfortunately, their responses are much like that. You get a blink out of Alka, which is a solid blink, a good push, and Arkle just pops his beads and shrugs it off. I think unless you're getting that consistently enough to burn those beads, it's not going to make a difference.
Well, for sure, and we should definitely be seeing Pikarinoobs looking to capitalize off of that, whether that's the rotation from Thor coming over and kind of going, all right, guys, well, Arkle doesn't have beads. Can we abuse this? Can we do something with this? But I think we definitely need to see more of that as a little bit of a... And I'm not sure if that's mistimed, but Thor's going to drop that kill, but no dropping of kills going to happen in the mid lane as Zeros is going to put number 1 on his belt. Up into the sky goes Thor, however, over in this left side jungle, where he'll land, nobody knows. Potentially an attempt to land on Johnny there. If it was off the mark. If not, it was just an escape hole. Give him the benefit of the doubt. But meanwhile, the support under some pressure still. But sorry, Gore. Come on, please.
No, it's just I like the call, but I just don't see where Pikarinoobs are trying to go with this. You know what I mean? It felt very discordant between all of them. Like, not a lot of people were communicating, or if they were, it just wasn't lining up the way they wanted to. They wanted to fight on left, oh, but now there's a fight in mid. When we go mid, oh, wait, now I can try to dunk on Johnny, but I'm not going to hit Johnny. Like, it's just, it felt like a lot of things that just didn't quite go right for them. And I like this gank on Julio. Normally I'd drop and say, look at the fight. But he's a Wukong. He's going to be alive.
Yeah. Yeah, he just jumped into that cloud. If anything, Rapio comes out of that fight a little bit worse for wear. And in fact, looks like Johnny's going to take that opportunity to go and steal the blue buff in the meantime. So definitely comes out in favor of Beltslap there. I would totally trade out my ult for the enemy blue buff while playing solo.
And, I mean, as Wukong as well, you know, most of his ult... I was actually talking to Finch about this, I think yesterday at one point. We were sitting around and chatting, and I was saying I love Wukong solo. And I think it's one of those things. We like to meme it. He stays alive. Bird form gets you out of the fight very well. His ult gets you out of a fight. That somersault cloud heals you as well, so you can even re-engage if you use it properly. And there's a lot of maybe memes about his survivability that can come into it. But then you also have to factor in he's got a good stun, he comes with a knock-up, he's got a slow, an attack speed slow, and if you are going to look at him as kind of a late-game frontliner, he's pretty devastating if he gets to your backline. I mean, Davey and Rapio would have a lot of trouble dealing with him on his own, and so I think there's a lot that can be said if Julio can keep this pace up where he's relatively unanswered. It's going to go really well for Beltslap in the late game once again.
Well, I think even if Julio does go answered, if someone decides to pick up the phone whenever he tries to call, I don't think it's really going to matter too much because it fits exactly into his playstyle like we saw him on the tier, as Rapio potentially looking for a gank onto that left lane, but decides probably for the better to just go and continue farming up. But just going back to that for a second, I feel like Julio will find a way to kill someone and fight regardless. And, sorry, speaking of fights, cutting myself off once again here on the left-hand side, as Beltslap are looking to get some pressure onto Pikarin, but in fact, they're just going to try and run away.
Yeah, it's just been... I don't know, it's interesting watching Pikarinoobs trying to get aggressive, but unfortunately always being, well, much like that one, just one step behind, right? You get a double blink that amounts to nothing, and unfortunately for them, it's just starting to fall behind. I think that they have a lot of open opportunities still available to them. They just haven't quite come to fruition. And like you said, Julio, at least in his mind, I think this goes for a lot of Beltslap, any pressure on them immediately is pressure that's not being put onto Zeros, not being put onto Arkle, not put onto Johnny, which opens them up to be, I think, even more aggressive and even happier with the way the games that are going to continue going.
For sure, and I think that's one of the trademarks of a really, really good team in that they can kind of go, all right, well, I might be taking the L this game, and, you know, the pressure's all coming onto me, but we'll take that, and as a team, we'll go, okay, well, then we'll focus on getting Zeros ahead, or, you know, whoever isn't getting pressured, as you said. And I think it's going to be really useful for them, and I think it's why we see them be so dominant, because it doesn't matter what the enemy team is trying to do, Beltslap will find another way to still come out on top.
And unfortunately, that's just been the case. You know, it feels bad. At this point, we're in Phase 3 playoffs, and Beltslap haven't lost a set all year, right? And that's one of those things, like, if you're Pikarinoobs, it's awesome to get a game off of Beltslap at this point. I mean, that's noteworthy in and of itself. But coming into a full set and, you know, trying to be the team that takes them down, that's the hard thing to do mentally, and I think there's a lot of teams that have potential, and we've seen it, you know, throughout some of these teams. Even the Open Circuit team during the last playoffs making some interesting plays, but no one's really been able to lock them down consistently.
Yeah, for sure, and you know, there are so many interesting things that we see over the course of SCC, but hold that as over here in the left-hand side, Johnny gonna pick up Pikarino. He is gonna be able to do some amount of damage to turn around, but not quite able to survive long enough in that death stance to find any return kill. Johnny, though, without his ultimate, is gonna fall down there to Davey, picking up one for himself. Under the water goes Trix Tank, comes back up, does a fair amount of damage to Davey, potentially looking for a block here to try and follow up with Zeros, who's rotated, and Arkil, who's on his way back now. Trix Tank forces the dash under tower, but now Captain OT trying to turn around, forced to ult away. Arkil not letting him get any sort of space away from him up into the sky. Here come that Astral Barrage arrows. Alka again under pressure, but now from the sky yet again it's going to be Rapio continuing on this fight, but he's going to get stuck. OT starts the fight, but straight away he's going to get traded out by Rapio. Zeros takes credit for that kill, and that should be the wash here, unless Zeros looks like he might want something else, but Alka recognizing the spacing, blinks back in, tries to find something, but Zeros is going to put him into the ground, and that could be it, other than the fact that Zeros is still going in. Captain OT trying to make something happen, but Zeros now, he's on no HP, and back comes Davey.
What is I said earlier about North America being the ones who just fight for no reason? That was... I don't know if I want to use the term sloppy or fun. Either way, it was exactly what you... At least I would have expected to see. We were watching some of the NA teams. Just an all-out brawl, and at the end of the day, I don't know who comes out on top, realistically. I mean, both teams lose a lot of their carries and lose a lot of their potential for turning that fight, just for the sake of trying to find that one more kill. Again, it all ends up favoring Belt Slap at the end of the day, just because they're still 1,000 gold ahead overall in Pikarinoobs. And now they're even in a position, if they can pick off Alka here, or maybe even anybody, it doesn't have to be Alka, they could turn into a Gold Fury if they really wanted to. Johnny's back with his ult up. It's going to help shred through that a little bit faster. But it does look like they're going to play it just a little bit slower once again. Everything just decides to pop off in duo lane there, and ultimately Zeros, I think, is the one who comes out victorious. He gets 3 kills now on his belt, where he's going to be very happy to be able to spend some of that gold and turn it into farm. And yeah, you end up losing a few people throughout the process there. You know, 4 for 4 read the kills, but at the end of the day, I think it's net benefit for Belt Slap.
For sure, and like, I'm pretty sure after that engagement, Zeros was able to back and pretty much full buy Divine Ruin, just like that, so, as you said, definitely no complaints coming out from the Birdman, but what's kind of the, alright, that's the next play. Thanks for answering my questions, Joni. Now, Gore, giving you an answer, an attempt to answer, what's the next play for both of these teams?
Well, again, for Belt Slap, I think it's try to take some of the pressure they have and try to turn it into some objective. I was thinking Gold Fury, but looking at the map, it looks like they're thinking Pyromancer, and so they're going to be able to at least pick up something in their favor. And again, turning a lead into more of a lead is what this team does well, right? And now Johnny being able to get a couple of kills, Zeros showcasing his prowess. This is where things, I think, for Belt Slap start to shine up. They look for team fights, they look for picks, whatever they can find, it's going to be beneficial for them. If I'm Pikarinoobs, I'll be honest, I'm a little lost. I'm looking for Rapio, trying to find something big. Captain Odie needs to start making maybe more rotations to turn this around, because otherwise, I don't know if they're going to be able to hold on as long as they'd like.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you there. I still haven't really seen as much of an impact from Rapio as I've been hoping to. You know, we were saying last game about the Pele needing to make an impact early, this game with the Thor, and just none of it's really coming through, as Belt Slap are going to pick up pretty much a free Gold Fury there. In fact, trading mid laner ults as the fight, potentially looking to break around here. Arkle's going to take down Davey before he's able to get up into the airstrike, and Pikarino, I'm not sure if he's going to be able to get away from the Monkey Man, but Arkle picking up number 2 on his belt. Down from the Somersault Cloud comes Julio, smushing that mid laner straight into the ground. Number 4 on the board for Belt Slap in this engagement, and I'm not sure Captain Oti's going to find himself with much more of a favorable fate, as he should fall down here in just a second and potentially open up, I mean, literally anything Belt Slap want to do.
Yeah, I think this is, man, that's just unfortunate for Pikarinoobs. First off, you're still all dead for a few more seconds, which is insane in terms of timing. Should be a Fire Giant coming up soon for Belt Slap. If not, I'm starting to question where their priorities are. Maybe the towers, but Fire Giant seems so easy to scoop up here. At 18 minutes in, it's going to give them that lead. Very similar to game number 1 that will turn this so heavily in their favor that you start to stress out if you're a Pikarinoobs fan. But you're happy. At least they still have 4 towers standing up, so there's more for Belt Slap to have to work through in order to make this work out for them. It's taken them a little while to get this done right now, which is a little stressful, I think, for Belt Slap as a whole. But they finally get it, and they're going to seal the deal. That last fight is just unfortunate for Pikarinoobs all around, though, right? You lose because everybody's fighting what felt like 3 separate engagements, whereas Belt Slap were fighting 1 engagement. Julio does a great job of separating the team and making sure some people are forced to fight him. Good snipes from Arkle. It was mentioned in Game 1 how great it was to try and strip this pick away from Arkle because the ROM is just, it feels like home for him, and we got to see that a lot in that last team fight. Now they're comfortable, they get themselves a tier 2, they've got a pretty massive lead. I'm looking at Johnny's items and I'm a little scared. I'm looking at the slash line for Zeros, and I'm starting to get even more worried if I'm Pikarinoobs, because turning this one around almost feels like what we were saying last game, and at 19 minutes I don't like having to say that you're looking for a Phoenix defense, but it almost feels like you're just waiting to try and defend around there. You might be able to put up a fight around a tier 2, but given the penetration and the Fire Giant now online for Belt Slap, it's a little iffy to make that call, and it's that question of how sure of yourselves are you that you could make a defense around a tower versus your Phoenixes.
Yeah, no, I gotta completely agree with you here. I think the Phoenix call, while, as you said, it's very much like, is it too early to start talking about defending Phoenix? But I think it's definitely the right call, like, considering just the differences in levels of some of these players. I mean, Alka's level 11 to Trix is 14, and on support, that is such a huge difference, and, well, it might even be enough of a difference to make Alka fall down here, as, yeah, there's no way he's escaping that. Falls down yet again. 3 deaths on the board for Mr. Hey! But, yeah, I think it's probably going to be in Pikarinoobs' best interests to try and find this Phoenix defense. Maybe look for a big Thor roll. Maybe look for an execute or 2 from Captain Odi. But, like, what really can they do? You know?
Well, hey, silver lining, because Alka's still level 11. It was 30-second respawn timer, so he's going to be back pretty soon. And at least that's going to help defend Phoenixes. We were wondering if it was too soon. All the towers are gone now, so it's never too soon.
No, absolutely, and 2 Phoenixes being put under pressure here. The left one is going to fall down for pretty much free. The mid one was successfully defended, though, by Pikarin, but in their in Belt Slap's defense, they did only send their tanks and Joni to try and defend it, but Pikarin actually not staying under Phoenix. They're trying to fight outside here. The dunk comes through, and so does the plant, but up into the sky goes Arkle to get his way out of the thorn bush. Joni gonna keep chomping through these players, though. 1, 2, 3 fall down. Arkle takes credit for the 3rd one, and now this mid Phoenix might not even come into the equation with only 2 players left standing. No ultimate available for Pikarino. I'm not really sure there's anything that they can do against Belt Slap, who are just charging in. Davies trying to get off some of this damage, but the Titan's already at half HP. The damage is coming through not only onto the Titan, but onto the players as well. And actually, it looks like Belt Slap might be dividing their focus too much here. And it looks like they might actually get pushed off of the Titan.
The Titan's doing as much work as it can, and luckily for Pikarino and the team, it's going to get their respawn timers in just in time. That was just, I don't even know, like you said, I think the best way to word it is that they were focusing on too much. They were trying to get kills and kill Titan. If they had focused on just kills or on just Titan, then I think we'd either see the end. No, we would be seeing the end. It's not, I think. The game would be over by now. And the fact that they all lose a little bit there is unfortunate for Belt Slap. More just prolongs the inevitable, I think, at this point. 2 Phoenixes already down. Difficult, I think, for Pikarinoobs to hold on to this. The Titans just a little over half HP, maybe at half HP there. So you're still sweating just as much now, if not more, than you were a few minutes ago.
No, for sure, but another, in my opinion, kind of a perplexing play here coming up from Rapia. We haven't seen him ult barely all game, but decides to go and try and defend this Oni Fury here. Sorry, the Primal Fury, but actually, they do manage to pick up a kill. Arkle falls down here in defense of this Fury. And, I mean, I don't know why Pikarinoobs are fighting so far up here in this situation, but I guess it works out for them somehow.
I was going to say, the first time they've decided to fight outside of their Phoenix, they got Zeros and lost almost everyone, and it almost cost them the game. The second time, you get Arkle, and you don't lose anybody in response. So that's at least a good pick to be able to get aggressive, find something. But you feel like, at least in my eyes, you invested a lot. You don't have 3 of your ults online right now. Fire Giant's going to be coming back in about 10 seconds, so at the end of the day, I don't think it really hurts Belt Slap that much for where Arkle dies. It gets you some of the experience and gold because of the bounty that he would have had on his head. But now they'll be able to take the Fire Giant just in time for Arkle to respawn and get the buff as well. It's a lot of weight, maybe onto Rapio, maybe onto Alka to be the ones to defend this if they can try to strip it away.
For sure, and it doesn't look like they're going to even try. I think they're aware that it's going on, but I don't think, and I think they're absolutely right to not try and defend the Fire Giant. Yeah. I gotta quickly circle back to that Primal Fury defense and be like, yeah, they got the kill, but why? Why did they get the kill? You know, like, for what reason did they decide to go and defend that Primal, especially as the Fire Giant was coming up? Like, we could have seen that exact same defense happen around the Fire Giant, which could have maybe turned the tables and given Pikarine a space to try and get their way back into this game.
Yeah, it's interesting to see them put that much effort, like you said, into a Primal Fury of all things. Like, maybe the one of all Furies that is so easy to just let go to the wayside. Like, you ignore that because of what's going to come up afterward. So, I guess intriguing to see what Pikarinoobs are trying to go for here. And maybe just unfortunate because they get that aggressive, they get that kill, and like you said, it doesn't really result in anything. They just have to keep defending left and mid. And now you're in the same position you were last time, except there's only one Phoenix up, and they have Fire Giant, and the Titan's already at half health. You have to be way more careful with this split, because I'm looking at Julio, who's looking to loop around and ganking.
Yeah, and he's being joined by his jungler, Johnny, also attempting to actually, potentially even just following the wave and going straight for the Titan. But, I mean, he could. He's a Bakasura. He has his ultimate available to him, but the whole of Pikarinoobs also holding on to their 4 buttons, looking to potentially find some sort of defense here. What is going to be the first move?
Well, the Phoenix goes down, and it seems like Belt Slap are going to take it slow. With mid and left about to respawn, they're just going to take those for good measure. But you've got 3 waves of minions that are pouring into your base, 2 of which are fire minions. This is usually a death sentence.
Yeah, absolutely, and it looks like Captain OT is going to be the first one to actually accept his punishment, but for now it's looking like it could have a turnaround. OT takes to the sky, trying to get the execute, but not quite on time. A little bit longer, and it might have worked out, but Rapio does find the kill, but he is going to get traded out nice and quickly there by Arkle. Now it's going to be Alka falling down to Johnny, and now once again it's up to Pikarino and Davey to attempt to save this, but I don't think it's quite going to work out for them this time. Down from the sky comes Julio. Pikarino gets smushed into the sidewalk. Once again, only Davey up against the world. The world says, sorry, Davey, not today. And that is going to be 2-0 for Belt Slap, winning off the set. Pikarinoobs, we'll see you in the losers bracket, but welcome to semifinals, Belt Slap.
Yeah, no Miracle Play Part 2 where they stop the Titan defense, or they maintain a Titan defense there once again. And I can't count how many times that I've seen Belt Slap end, but unfortunately Zeros goes down. Like, every single time it feels like Zeros is the one who gets honed in, his team won't peel for him, he gets burned down, and then they win the fight anyway. It's fun to watch, but either way, Belt Slap, like you said, moving on to the semifinals. Not the end of the road for Pikarinoobs, definitely some things to take home and kind of take note of as they work forward through that lower bracket, but I think the highlight is that, well, Belt Slap still undefeated as of right now. Somebody's got to take them down soon.
Well, not fingers crossed for Belt Slap, obviously, but hopefully we can see potentially a bit of an upset. As you said, Belt Slap haven't actually lost a set this entire season, so I think it would be super cool to see one of these other teams come up and rise to the challenge, but we'll have to see who will be facing them in that semifinal game, as we're going to throw you guys to a quick break, but we'll be back very shortly with the next set in the SCC playoffs.
just like that, Belt Slap start off their Phase 3 playoffs weekend with the 2-0 over Pikarinoobs 2. How do we get there, though? Alpha Jackal is with me to break down. We already talked a good bit about game number 1. Game number 2 here, though, AJ, was a little bit longer by the factor of 2 or 3 minutes, I suppose, but still very much in Belt Slap's control. This one felt more like a whole team effort, lots of big fights that just kept going Belt Slap's way time in and time out.
Yeah, for 4 of the 5 members of Belt Slap, it went their way. Poor Zero's just fed to the lambs, as it were. But that's sort of the way it goes if you're a Thoth. If you manage to get dove upon by a Achilles and a Thor, you kind of do expect to die, but you also expect the rest of your team to clean up, and they did that perfectly. Especially, Johnny, he's usually in the backline, looking for the kills onto their backliners, onto Davian, onto Pikarino. But most of his kills came up onto OT, came up onto Rapia, came onto Alka, which is a bit more unusual, but it speaks more of their adaptability in their drafts and their gameplay.
And all things considered, Zero's had a okay slash line, 5-3, but really the damage from Arkle took over towards the end there. 21,000, higher than basically any 2 people you could put together on Pikarinoobs, a little bit less than that to be fair, but Arkle had himself an absolute game there on the ROM. So good temperature check for this Belt Slap team. Not that we needed one. We knew what they were bringing here into this weekend, but they obviously have shown that they're here to play. But the team that is going to face them in the semifinals, that'll be decided here in just a minute. Alpha Jackal, Poppies versus Snake Pit. That'll be the next matchup we watch here. Of course, Pikarinoobs 2. They drop down to the losers bracket round 1. They'll face the loser of, again, the next matchup that we're going to watch here. So you start to look towards Poppies versus Snake Pit. What do you like there in that matchup? Do you give either team an edge kind of on a high level?
I think more often than not, you're going to be expecting the Poppies to take the set victory. They have done throughout pretty much the entirety of the SEC, apart from in Phase 1, where they stumbled to a 4th place finish. Otherwise, they have been the closest challengers to Belt Slap. So I'd say about a 75-25 chance that it's going to be the Poppies advancing from that set.
Sure. Hey, it's sometimes all it takes is that 25% vote. We've seen some lopsided matchups go the opposite way this year, so maybe the next one will be more of the same. We've already got 1 ticket punched onto the semifinals. That is Belt Slap, Poppies versus Snake Pit. It'll be up right after this quick break. See you in a sec.